This is a story of men who feel betrayed. Men from a community which did more than any other to help the Tory government in a moment of crisis. It's 5 a.m. at the Silverhill Colliery in Nottinghamshire. Most of these men are members of the Union of Democratic Mine Workers who worked through the year-long miners' strike of 1984. Today, again, they want to work.
But what I've got to tell you this morning, gents, is that despite your obvious willingness to go in the mine, I'm going to have to send you home. There'll be some people required, and Mr. Hughes has got a list of names, to go with the deputies and just go around and make sure things are in
the men must stop cutting coal. A handful will stay on to carry out maintenance work.
After this,
most of my professional life I've been trying to get people to go underground to work hard, and here I am telling them to go home and do nothing and they can have the wages just the same.
Any questions?
If this colliery does not work, the pit will lose £500,000 a week. It's absolutely crazy not to let these men go to work and take coal. And as well as that, they're being threatened by industrial relations with their redundancy. What's the position?
Those that try to force their way into the mine, if that was the intention en bloc, would clearly be in breach of my instructions, and that, as I understand it, could put them in some difficulty.
In answer to what you've just said, Bert,
yes.
The public can see that you're here, you're ready to go to work, and the nonsense is of the situation where he's going to be sending men home that could actually be turning coal. It is a crazy, mad situation.
The government has decided, on Coal Board advice, we produce too much coal. We aren't competitive and can't sell all we mine. Britain's coal industry must be run down. 9 days ago, they announced 31 pits would close. This week, 21 were given a reprieve, while the Coal Board and the government, under pressure, set out the full case for the closures. In effect, this means a stay of execution. But 10 pits seem destined to shut after Christmas. Silverhill is one of them. They've been mining at Silverhill for generations. The Coal Board's been the biggest employer here for 120 years. They only cut top-grade coal, and unlike elsewhere, their stockpiles have already been sold to a local power station. These men claim they've met production targets and made substantial profits for the Coal Board. They believe the pit had at least 5 good years of life left. But the government says Silverhill's uneconomic. The closure announcement came out of the blue.
And as I was coming home, the person opposite me had been reading the paper, and when he held it up to read the inside pages, I saw the announcement on the front page. This is a bit of a strange way to find out.
I'd be a fool to say it didn't, but I didn't do it, or our members didn't do it for the Tories. But there was a fusion that took place, and I'd be an idiot to say it didn't. It is now apparent, obviously, that the Tory government, and Tory MPs in particular, looked to what we did as being that saved their government at that time.
Individuals who thought that the UDM was a good idea and thought that Link and others were decent people who would be interested in representing miners' interests rather than high Marxist politics and trying to chuck out Conservative governments, thought it would be a good idea to give them money so that they could start their own union and look after the Nottingham miners' interests.
Did the Tory government make promises to them to look after them?
Absolutely. On several occasions in my presence, undertakings were given by senior Conservative ministers to UDM officials that they would never let them down.
What did they mean by that?
Well, I think they meant that they certainly wouldn't do what they've just done or nearly done until they made a U-turn, and close pits without proper consultation and without making sensible suggestions for ways that the problem could be dealt with.
On Monday, Michael Heseltine announced that aid for miners losing their jobs would be coordinated by the former Energy Secretary, now Lord Walker. But pitmen feel betrayed.
We had a breakaway union, which I think in the end that's been the end of it. They said, you come to work, we'll make sure that Nottinghamshire pits are all right.
You're talking about the Tory government?
Yeah. A load of rubbish. They've done the same to us as they've done to everybody.
7 of the 13 Nottinghamshire mines face closure. A week ago, in disgust, Roy Link descended 1,200 feet into the mine's shaft where he worked 30 years ago to stage a one-man protest. Hold on a second.
Yeah, Roy. I'm on my way down now. Is that what you want bringing?
Mr. Link, you've had good relations in the past with the Tory party. What's your attitude to the government now?
Yeah, I think I got shafted more than once by the government. I think the way we've been treated collectively is a crime, and the way I've been treated personally by people talking to me, listening to me, and then doing nothing about what I said. I feel very aggrieved. That's why I'm sitting here.
It was the sheer brutality and speed of the proposed closures that has so incensed the British public and some Tory backbenchers, which has now forced the government into an embarrassing reappraisal.
The government seems to have forgot that the statistics that they read every month, they're actually people, that the people with families. And you can't just blindly look at 3 or 4 million people and say we're driving to nil inflation. That's no consolation to somebody who's just lost his job.
Mr. Link is so angry he's returning his OBE. But last week he was reminded of the bitterness of those who feel if the UDM had joined the '84 strike, they wouldn't be facing the dole now. What came through the post on the day your husband went down the mine?
A death threat. It was a Christmas card with Santa Claus on the front, and inside it had got scum in big letters, and on the opposite side it had got some obscene language, and then it said, "You'll either be dead for Christmas or I hope you die before Christmas."
But Roy Link's lone protest is the result of a genuine grievance. The Coal Board claimed the first of the pits to be closed were loss makers and shouldn't be subsidised by the taxpayer. But with a declining market for coal, Nottinghamshire miners had been lulled into a false sense of security, not least by a series of letters from Coal Board officials congratulating the county and in some cases Silverhill itself on producing record-breaking amounts of coal. In March, the then Deputy Chairman John Northard referred to the Nottinghamshire operations as the backbone of the corporation and said, "Recent results augur well for a more secure future and will add strength to our case in the current contract negotiations." Your bosses at the Coal Board say they're closing the uneconomic mines. Is your mine uneconomic?
We've made money over the last 3 years. £500,000, £1 million last year, £2 million. And we were projected to make £3 million profit this year. We've had a desperate start to the year. The mining conditions have been awful, and we've lost, at the minute, £3 million. So the best, really, we could hope for would be to fight back to a draw, and go for a break-even this year.
The plight of Britain's miners has opened the whole debate on the country's energy policy, which the government said yesterday it would totally review. My colleague Peter Gill has been examining the role of coal in the power market.
Coal has always been the power behind Britain. On the coast of Cumbria, this coal power station was left to rot. The old Roosecote station was shut down after 30 years of service. Now, like a phoenix from those ashes, a new power station is born. It's part of a revolution in the energy-generating business. It's fired by gas. The gas comes from beneath Morecambe Bay. It's already creating electricity for communities in the northwest. Natural gas was once considered so precious that Europe banned its use in electricity production. But British lobbying helped to get the restriction lifted. The aim was to diversify power sources and reduce the dominance of coal.
Where the government was as keen as possible to get competition, and to get competition against the very large coal-fired power stations, it was necessary to build more power stations. The cheapest and easiest ones to build were ones that would be powered by gas, and therefore we had the so-called dash for gas, whereby many companies set up smaller gas-fired generating plants to bring the competition the government wanted with its privatised electricity supply industry.
But this presumably was market economics at work and Tory philosophy at work, and a good thing.
Well, it was Tory philosophy. We all believe in competition on my side of the house, but I don't believe that the consequences were fully known.
The argument now is over whether that competition between power sources is fair or whether it's been rigged against coal. This is the playing field on which the energy game is conducted. At present, coal is king, around 70% of the market. Next comes nuclear, both home-produced and imported from France, around 25%. The rest is made up of oil, other imports and a small contribution from gas. The nuclear contribution will grow over the next few years, but it's gas that's set to win the game in the 1990s. From its current tiny contribution, experts predict that it could grow to 25% of the market, all of it at the expense of coal. Far from deliberately targeting coal, the government's case is that the taxpayer has actually bailed it out. Now, with the recession biting, coal is being produced that no one wants. Pits must accordingly close. The government says it's poured billions into the industry, over £400,000 per miner, but that sort of commitment is now in the past.
There is no taxpayers' money going into coal production at the moment at all. And when the government sought to say we've spent 18 billion over the last 13 years, that was true. But all that money was spent because of the strike and because of an enormous debt write-off of British coal. There's been no production money going into British coal for 2 years.
In your view, has the marketplace that's opened up since electricity privatisation, has that marketplace been tilted against coal?
It's been completely distorted against UK coal. It leans slightly in favour of imported coal, but by blocking off the nuclear stations, which are much more expensive than coal, and allowing in an enormous tranche of gas stations, which are much more expensive than coal, coal's just wilted away to a rump of where it should be.
The favoured power of the 1980s was nuclear. This is where the real subsidy comes in. At privatisation, our old nuclear stations proved unsaleable. The costs of future decommissioning meant a special subsidy of £1,200 million a year. No such help for coal, and the nuclear levy has some surprising beneficiaries.
It extends, as we all know, through the nuclear levy to nuclear electric. And of course, because it was necessary to get agreement to the nuclear levy in Brussels, because it's anti-competitive, I understand that the RECs, the electricity distribution companies, were allowed to charge 11% addition to their bills for French nuclear power.
So the British government has ended up actually partially subsidising the French nuclear industry.
It's not the British government, it's the electricity consumer, it's you and me.
For consumers, there is no real choice. We only have one source of electricity, the privatised local monopolies. But the suppliers do have a choice. They've used gas to challenge coal and to take on the big generators, Powergen and National Power. The economic case for gas appeared solid. Gas-fired power is set on a course of dramatic expansion. The dash for gas is here and now. The first of the new generation of gas-fired power stations is already on stream. This year they'll displace less than 1 million tonnes of coal. But by the middle of the decade, 25 of these stations could be displacing up to 30 million tonnes of coal. The growth of gas seems unstoppable. The question is whether it represents a good deal or a bad deal for us, the electricity consumers. At present, there's little difference between electricity from the gas-fired stations and the coal plants. The price of both is around 2.6p per kilowatt hour. But the first gas-powered stations got favourable deals. By the mid-90s, British Gas will be charging the stations much more. 3.2p per kilowatt hour is the likely price then of electricity from gas. The coal equivalent could fall to 2.2p per kilowatt hour, the result of new coal contracts.
In the long run, gas will be depleted. We only have 50 years supply of gas. And coal, we have 300 years supply of coal. So we will find in 5 or 6 years' time the two cost lines cross over. Coal will be getting cheaper, gas will be getting more expensive, and we shall then realise we've made a very bad decision in 1992.
And in your view, does the electricity consumer end up paying the price of this?
Well, one way or another, the consumers will end up paying the price of it. If it's not on their electricity bill, it'll be on their tax bill or their VAT bill. So short term, certainly the consumer will pay. But long term, the consumer will pay once again as expensive gas starts to replace coal, which could be so much cheaper.
While the miners at Silverhill were being turned away from work last Monday, the coal industry was staging its biggest international get-together of the year in the south of France. This week's Coal Trans conference in Nice attracted more than 1,000 delegates. The planned closure of British mines prompted covetous thoughts from overseas traders and analysts.
From a South African standpoint, obviously it's a benefit. If you're an exporter of steam coal and you're getting declining domestic production in the UK, it only helps other exporters.
There's only a limited scope for that coal to come from South Africa. I would imagine that people, producers in Australia and the US, would be looking at England with great interest.
One keynote address was delivered by the former commercial director of British Coal. His view is that the projected pit closures aren't commercially justified.
I think if they were in the private sector, very few of them would close immediately. They would be worked on some scale for some time. But if you're talking about continuing mines, mines with a genuine future, probably up to half of them.
Are viable.
They would be viable, yes.
The reprieve conceded to some miners this week may only be temporary. At our coal-fired power stations, there's the same lack of security. The power workers could be next in line. Like the miners whose coal they burn, their jobs are also at the mercy of the market and the dash for gas.
87, 87.
The knock-on effect of mass redundancies will affect everyone connected with the coal industry.
26.
Silverhill's miners considered themselves fortunate. They had jobs in an area where 1 in 6 are out of work.
And a house called on 46. Clear.
What would your message be now to the government?
Let's keep his job.
All I can say is that John Major can buy his children what he wants for Christmas, and I can't buy mine.
How many children have you
3.
got? How long has your husband been a miner?
Since 16.
How many years is that?
20 to 21 years.
The knock-on effect is going to allow us more than the miners' jobs. It's going to go right through the land. Jobs are going to be lost throughout the land, so I'm marching with him Wednesday, that's all I can say, down London, to see you, John Major.
On Wednesday morning, Silverhill's miners prepared to go to London. Like thousands of others, they would try to persuade a government committed to full employment to save their jobs. They feel they're competing to supply an energy source in a rigged market. With recent falls in the value of sterling, they believe they can also be competitive against cheap imports if only their mine could stay open.
Coal can be economic, coal can make... We made a profit, a bottom line profit. We're not asking for subsidy, we're not asking to be treated as a special case. We don't want billions of pounds in redundancy. We want to keep making a profit.
60,000 people who support that view joined the London March. The miners will step up their campaign with more protests this weekend. At Silverhill today, the UDM leader Roy Link emerged to hugs from his family, shattered but undaunted by his week-long sit-in.
I just hope that what I've done has been a success. I personally think it is. And if it gives this pit or the other 31 pits a chance, at least we'll get some sort of an investigation, because somebody's making a right bloody mess of it. And I think the way that the ordinary people have responded right throughout the country indicate their concern about the way the government's going.